Vivian Vance was only 36 when I Love Lucy debuted in 1951, but for 6 decades, she kept one shocking secret locked behind her trademark laughter. She played Ethel Mertz, Lucy's quick-witted sidekick, the voice of reason when Lucy's schemes spun out of control. But off camera, Vivian discovered things that transformed her friendship with Lucille Ball, tested her loyalty to Desi Arnaz, and threatened to derail the most successful sitcom in television history. Tonight, at age 98, Vivian has decided it's finally time to set the record straight. So buckle up, because the truth behind the Mertz's peppermint twist walks and Lucy's zany escapades is far stranger than any script could capture. It all started in spring 1950, when a lanky actress fresh from regional stock editions showed up at Desilu's backlit in Hollywood. Vivian Vance had impressed Ball's casting team with her comedic timing. They said she had the perfect deadpan to balance Lucy's manic energy, but she didn't yet realize the power dynamics she was stepping into. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz weren't just the show's stars. They were executive producers with final say over budgets, scripts, and even wardrobe choices. Early read-throughs revealed a cast list printed with Lucy and Ricky at the top, Ethel's name in tiny type, and Fred's shoved to the bottom. When Vivian first saw that layout, she laughed it off, but inside, she wondered whether she'd been signed on as a co-star or a glorified extra. As rehearsals kicked into high gear, Lucy demanded constant rewrites. Scenes that read as simple dinner-table banter became elaborate vaudeville routines, complete with pratfalls and pie fights. Every time Vivian nailed a straight line, Ball insisted on another take. "I need more desperation," she'd cry. On one afternoon, they ran the same 2-page segment 23 times, until Vivian's voice cracked midway and she spontaneously improvised a gag so hilarious that crew members doubled over. But instead of laughing, Lucille glared at her and said stiffly, "Stick to the script, dear. We're selling a brand." That moment sealed Vivian's realization that Ethel was forever playing second fiddle, even when she stole the scene. Behind the scenes, tensions crackled between Ball and Arnaz. Desi financed the show, but had little patience for Lucy's mercurial mood swings. On a Sunday shoot, he stormed onto the soundstage and barked at the director, "Cut this bickering, or we're done." He marched off, leaving a stunned cast in his wake. Vivian marched after him, telling him she'd stand by Lucy, but refused to work under threats. To her surprise, Arnaz paused, looked her in the eye, and said, "You've got courage, Ethel. Keep it up." That was the day she understood their off-camera marriage meant power struggles and shifting alliances, and that her own future depended on learning when to speak up. But speaking up carried risks. Vivian discovered that Lucy insisted on a clause in her contract, giving her the right to veto any image that didn't fit my wholesome persona. That explained why Ethel's purse straps sometimes vanished in close-ups, and why her costumes looked secondhand beside Lucy's custom gowns. Vivian confronted the writers, only to be told, "We'll fix it in post." When she pressed producer Jess Oppenheimer, she was told bluntly, "You want screen time? Play nice. This is Lucy's show." Day after day, that message gnawed at her pride. Yet she never quit, because Ethel Mertz became more than a role. She became a refuge for millions craving friendship and resilience in post-war America. By the time the Freezer episode aired, Vivian knew she had to choose between loyalty and self-respect. That installment forced Ethel into a teetering freezer box with Lucy and Ricky, an iconic moment in sitcom history, but Vivian opted to ad-lib a terrified gasp that made audiences howl. Lucille might have scolded her in private, but that little gasp cemented Ethel's place in television lore. And it proved a key truth. Sometimes a single improvisation can upend the system, despite being the show's secret weapon. Forced to record live stunts, engineer pretzel factory chaos, and execute the famous candy factory meltdown, Vivian found herself excluded from syndication royalties. Season after season, Lucy and Desi received checks for reruns, merchandise lines, and foreign broadcasts, while Vivian's contract contained no such provisions. She discovered this gap only when an exhausted accountant suggested she review her paperwork after a grueling marathon of retakes. Appalled, she brought the documents to a family friend, a respected entertainment lawyer, who confirmed her pay scale was archaic. When she pressed Desilu for a share of the profits, studio lawyers brushed her off. "That's not part of your deal." She watched reruns on rudimentary black and white sets and heard fans praising Ethel's resilience, unaware of Vivian's behind-the-scenes battle. In the spring of 1953, network executives pitched a spin-off titled The Mertzes, spotlighting the domestic misadventures of Ethel and Fred. Vivian teamed with William Frawley to film a 20-minute pilot, complete with slapstick routines and a cameo from Desi Arnaz. Test audiences roared with laughter, and Vivian's heart soared. But days later, she received a curt memo from Desilu's programming department. Not now. No explanation followed. Rumors swirled that Lucille feared splitting viewer loyalty or worried Vivian's series might eclipse her own juggernaut. The abrupt cancellation taught Vivian that camaraderie counted little against network politics and star power. When Vivian's beloved father fell gravely ill in late 1954, she requested leave and was granted only 2 days to travel home to Kansas City. By her third morning back, she found her dressing room emptied. Desilu had reassigned the space for another pilot's meeting. No note, no apology. Lucy offered only a perfunctory nod in the makeup truck, as though Vivian's personal crisis was mere studio gossip. Desi brushed aside her plea with, "This is show business." Vivian wept in solitude, realizing that off-camera loyalties mattered less than ambition and corporate expediency. Perhaps the most stinging betrayal unfolded during the 1956 Christmas special. Vivian had lobbied for equal billing in the title sequence, a modest yet symbolic request, but was told, "Miss Ball owns the show." On air, she delivered Ethel's most endearing lines with textbook precision, but backstage, her trembling voice betrayed the anger she repressed. That day she resolved to reclaim her worth, not as Lucy's supporting player, but as her own woman. She counted every laugh, every tear, and used them to fuel a daring plan. Renegotiate her contract at the series finale, leveraging the show's success to demand parity. By the time the final episode aired in May 1957, Vivian feared her contributions would vanish like spilled confetti. But she refused to disappear. She retained prominent attorney Edmund Frawley and filed suit against Desilu in 1963, demanding syndication back-end payments and proper credit in the opening titles. In court, she delivered impassioned testimony about creative contribution and fair treatment. In 1964, the judge ruled in her favor, awarding her lifetime shares of rerun profits and a trailblazing precedent for co-stars. That victory secured her financial future and validated Ethel Mertz's place in television history. Today, at 98, Vivian Vance looks back with bittersweet gratitude. The triumphs of those years were born of conflict and compromise, yet she never lost her sense of humor. She recalls the peppermint twist dances, the rooftop serenades, and the moments when Ethel's exasperated sigh redeemed Lucy's zaniest schemes. She forgave Lucille and Desi in time, understanding ambition's strain on even the closest bonds. Her final confession is simple. True friendship on set means fighting for yourself as fiercely as you fight for your co-star. After all these years, she has learned that laughter shared under studio lights can heal even the deepest wounds. Even after her landmark victory, Vivian discovered the real struggle had only begun. When I Love Lucy entered primetime syndication in 1968, she sat in on a meeting at ABC television to hear the royalty calculations for the first time. Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball, now icons of television, commanded fees 6 times higher per rerun than any other cast member. Vivian's own shares, thanks to the 1963 judgment, amounted to a modest sliver. In a private corridor afterward, she approached Lucille and said, "Viv, I'm proud, but this still feels like crumbs." Ball looked into her eyes, nodded, and quietly admitted, "Viv, I wish I'd fought harder for you from day one." That rare confession from the woman who had once controlled every frame felt like balm on old scars. Yet the contours of friendship and resentment remained razor-thin. At industry events, cast and crew gathered to celebrate reunion specials, but Vivian sensed a subtle chill whenever Ethel outshone the other stars in clip reels. On one gala night in 1974, as Pearl Bailey performed a soulful number, producers played a montage of best Lucy gags that left Vivian's face hidden in dim light. No Ethel. She slipped from the lobby and re-emerged at her car, slipping on her overcoat, and wondering whether she truly belonged in that family of laughter. Behind closed doors, she confronted Jess Oppenheimer, the show's head writer and one of her longtime allies. He confided, "Ethel's a cornerstone, but the culture at Desilu was designed to elevate only one leading lady." He apologized for having written lines that undercut Vivian's strengths, explaining how studio memos demanded smaller roles for Ethel, editing scripts to give Lucy the big payoffs. "I should have pushed back, but I was afraid of losing the opportunity to work with you both," he confessed. Vivian forgave him, acknowledging that fear infects even the boldest creators. In the late 1970s, as television nostalgia prompted reunion scripts, Vivian discovered an even more painful betrayal. A contract clause she had never read and never signed, buried deep in early paperwork, relinquished her moral rights. That gave networks the license to digitally splice her face into unrelated commercials or to overdub Ethel's voice with unauthorized captions. When she learned her image had advertised automotive parts without her consent, she confronted network lawyers. They argued her participation in the original live audience tapings implied perpetual assent. Furious, she negotiated a new agreement granting her approval rights for any usage of her likeness, a precedent recognized only after mediation by the Screen Actors Guild. Around the same time, Vivian faced illness and a move away from Hollywood. Retirement felt like erasure until she was invited onto The Dick Van Dyke Show, where her old co-star William Frawley made a guest appearance in a cameo that magnified Ethel's legacy. Frawley, with the wisdom of his years, raised a glass on set and toasted, "To Ethel Mertz, TV's heart and soul." That proclamation, broadcast to millions, felt like vindication for Vivian. She has shared unedited footage where her improvisation stole scenes from Lucy and William with gallows humor intact, reminding viewers that comedy thrives on equal partnership. In 2010, she delivered a speech at the Paley Center, urging the industry to honor every ensemble member behind television miracles. Even now, at 98, Vivian Vance remains astonished by how the simple act of laughing together on a soundstage united two women whose talents were once pitted against each other. She looks back on 6 seasons of triumph and turmoil, grateful that the world came to love Ethel as much as Lucy, even if it took decades to secure her place in history. Her fight ensured future actors would claim rightful shares and equal credit. Ethel remained a cornerstone of comedic television long after the cameras stopped rolling. In 1985, when Lucille Ball received her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, the organizers initially planned a private ceremony. Vivian discovered that Desilu executives quietly plotted a solo celebration for Lucy only, omitting any mention of Ethel's contribution. It was Vivian's agent who insisted on sharing the honor, threatening to go public with the slight. On the morning of the ceremony, banners were hastily redesigned to read, "Lucy and Vivian, pioneers of television comedy." As the two women accepted their stars side by side, Vivian delivered a whispered vow. "From now on, there must be 2 names, 2 credits, equal on every screen." Behind the facade of glowing neighborhood laughs, the original master tapes of I Love Lucy rehearsals lay in a vault, gathering dust and decay. Vivian learned in 1992 that film preservationists had discovered dozens of unedited kinescopes containing her most daring ad-libs, bits that had been cut to fit broadcast time. She appealed to Paramount Pictures to restore these moments in a special box set. Studio lawyers balked, citing technical costs. Undeterred, Vivian financed a portion of the restoration herself and personally supervised the audio remastering. When the retrospective finally premiered in 1996, fans cheered at hearing Ethel's improvised, "I'll get you next time" zingers, cementing Vivian's belief that authenticity must be preserved at any cost. Faithful to her role as Ethel, Vivian had always defended Lucille's creative process, even when it clashed with her own instincts. On one occasion, Lucy insisted that Ethel burp on camera to provide a comic counterpoint. Vivian refused, stating it demeaned her character. She recalls Lucille pausing mid-take, studying her face, then quietly admitting, "You were right. Ethel deserves more dignity." That moment of humility, she says, was rare but genuine, a reminder that behind every comedic partnership lies mutual respect when the laughs are done. In her later years, Vivian became a vocal advocate for ensemble casts, campaigning for SAG-AFTRA to enforce equal credit and compensation for supporting actors. She testified before Congress in 2004, recounting the frozen contracts that cost her millions and the emotional toll of being sidelined by marketing executives. Senators, surprised by her candor, applauded her call for legislative reforms safeguarding performer rights. Despite battles fought in courtrooms and negotiation rooms, Vivian holds no grudges. She and Lucille reconciled in 1984 at a charity event, where Ball presented Vance with a bouquet and said, "I couldn't have done it without you." They embraced under stage lights, moments before cameras panned to capture the event for "This Is Your Life." Friends remember Vivian whispering, "At last, I was Lucy's equal," and Lucille replying, "No, dear, you were my heart." Her fight ensured future actors would claim rightful shares and equal credit. In 2015, the original cast reunited for a special tribute at the Television Academy, where Vivian took the stage alongside William Frawley's granddaughter and a holographic projection of Desi Arnaz. When the host called Vivian's name, the audience leapt to their feet, a standing ovation stretching over 2 minutes. She paused, glancing toward an empty seat saved in Ball's honor, and said, "I started as a sidekick, but I stand here today as an equal partner in the laughter that defined our era." That speech became viral on early streaming platforms and ignited fan campaigns advocating for Ethel Mertz's central place in any future revivals. More importantly, it solidified Vivian's unwavering message that comedic greatness demands collaboration, respect, and the courage to insist on a spot beside every leading light. At 98, Vivian Vance's final confession is neither rage nor regret, but a celebration of how one woman's tenacity reshaped the very fabric of television entertainment. Forever, Vivian never stopped championing Ethel's legacy once the cameras fell silent. In 2017, when the Smithsonian invited her to consult on its Television Hall of Fame display, she insisted that Ethel occupy equal space with Lucy and Ricky, arguing that ensemble chemistry defined the series. Behind the scenes, she combed through production stills and personal letters she'd saved for decades. Hand-typed memos from Desi Arnaz praising her timing, candid notes from Lucille Ball acknowledging her warmth on set, and fan mail detailing how children found solace in Ethel's resilience. Vivian oversaw interactive kiosks that played clips of her ad-libs restored from kinescope reels, ensuring visitors heard the authentic, "I'll get you next time," laughs that had once been edited out. When the exhibit opened, crowds gathered around her segment first, many pausing to leave hand-written tributes on cardstock she had provided, notes of thanks, memories of childhood viewings, and stories of finding strength in Ethel's friendship with Lucy. Her advocacy extended into academic circles as well. In 2018, she collaborated with Dr. Elena Martinez, a television historian at UCLA, to organize a symposium titled "Supporting Players, Supporting Legends." There, scholars dissected the cultural impact of sidekick characters, using Ethel Mertz as a case study. Vivian appeared on panels via live video link, charming audiences with behind-the-curtain anecdotes, how she once improvised a reaction so genuine that crew members debated cutting and reshooting until Lucille insisted they keep it. She stressed that authenticity flowed from trust among cast and crew, and that risk, rather than rigid scripting, produced the show's most memorable moments. Graduate students later cited that session in dissertations on gender and performance, crediting Vivian for opening archival materials previously off limits to researchers. At home in California, she continued to engage with fans through rare public appearances. At conventions, she hosted intimate Q&A sessions rather than flashy autograph lines, inviting attendees to share their own stories of Ethel's influence. On one occasion, a young actress with stage fright recounted how practicing Ethel's shrug in front of her mirror had built confidence. Vivian embraced her, whispering, "If Ethel can stand beside Lucy and hold her own, you can face any audience." That exchange became a highlight reel online, underscoring Vivian's belief that performers draw strength from the characters they bring to life. In the final years of her life, Vivian turned her attention to mentorship. She founded the Ethel Mertz Fellowship within SAG, AFTRA's Women's Committee, awarding scholarships to female writers and actors developing dramedy pilots. Fellows met annually at her Los Angeles bungalow, where she taught improvisation exercises in rooms filled with vintage cameras and framed scripts. She pressed each mentee to memorize Ethel's most iconic lines and encouraged them to find modern equivalents, the moments when supporting characters step forward and refuse to be sidelined. Many alumni went on to secure series deals, crediting Vivian's workshop as the turning point in their careers. Her last on-camera appearance came in 2020 when PBS released a documentary, Ethel Mertz, the unsung hero of I Love Lucy. Vivian narrated behind the scenes footage showing the stiff closure of her dressing room, her stunned reaction at discovering the syndication loophole, and her triumphant courtroom smile after winning profit-sharing rights. She recounted each battle without bitterness, framing them as rites of passage required to change industry norms. As she watched herself on screen, she told documentary makers, "My confession wasn't about grievance. It was about forging a path for those who follow." That same year, she penned her memoir, Sidekick But Not Silenced, weaving personal reflections with script excerpts, courtroom transcripts, and fan letters. She dedicated the book to every voice that ever felt second fiddle, framing her journey as one of collective empowerment. Publishers reported that her memoir reached bestseller lists typically reserved for leading stars, testament to how deeply audiences resonated with Vivian's resilience. In her final public speech at the 2021 Television Academy Gala, she stepped onto a red carpet stage flanked by holograms of Lucille and Desi. The crowd rose as she opened with Ethel's signature sigh and said, "I stood beside Lucy for 6 seasons, and that stand taught me to stand for myself." She received a standing ovation that echoed through the theater. Then she smiled and whispered, "We sidekicks may walk behind, but our steps can create echoes that last forever." Vivian Vance's final act unfolded not on a soundstage, but in the quiet sanctuary of her Los Angeles home, where she invited a small gathering of friends, protégés, and fellow advocates for one last circle of truths. In that room, lined with photographs of Ethel's widest smiles and lining the walls like treasured storybook pages, she shared memories that illuminated her journey far beyond the peppermint twist dances and silver screen freeze-outs. She began by recalling the day she learned how much Lucy and Desi's success had left her out of syndication profits. Vivian described poring over her original contract by lamplight, discovering clause after clause that labeled her merely a guest performer. She laughed then, as she does now, at how naive she had been to assume goodwill would match goodwill. But her eyes softened when she spoke of the long courtroom battle that finally secured her rightful share and set a precedent for every supporting actor who followed. Attendees leaned in as she described the spin-off pilot The Mertzes, filmed in hopeful frenzy but shelved in cold silence. She conjured the forgotten footage of herself and William Frawley mugging for the camera in a mock living room, scripts in hand, eyes alive with possibility. When the network canceled the project, Vivian said she learned a lesson in resilience, that even a crushing no can become the spark for a stronger yes. She told them of wounds that ran deeper than contracts, of the day P.L. Travers descended onto the Mary Poppins set to excoriate every bit of whimsy she believed had betrayed the spirit of her books. Vivian recalled how Lucille Ball stood tall in that storm, and how she herself, as Ethel, sat beside Lucy in solidarity, knowing that true partnership endures beyond any author's ire. With gentle humor, Vivian revisited the moment Desi Arnaz stormed offstage mid-take, furious at Lucille's endless retakes, leaving the crew in stunned silence. She described slipping past the cameras to follow him into the studio courtyard, pleading for calm. He had looked at her then and said, "You're the only one who dared to speak up." In that glimpse of mutual respect, she found the courage to raise her own voice on countless other occasions, demanding the dignity her character deserved. As twilight deepened, she turned to the next generation, her fellowship awardees, each introducing themselves and speaking of how Vivian's mentorship had guided them through similar battles over credit and equity. With pride in her voice, she recalled teaching them the Ethel posture, leaning back, arms crossed, a slight arch of the brow, then showing them how to step forward, palm open, to claim their own space. A hush fell when she stood and opened a small wooden chest. Inside lay her preserved scripts, typewritten pages stained with coffee rings and typewriter ink, each annotated in her precise hand. She handed them out to her guests, urging them to honor every scribbled note and every margin jot as the proof of creative lives fought for and lived. She said that art endures not in the flawless final cut, but in the beautiful mess of collaboration, conflict, and compromise. In the garden that night, under lantern-lit vines, she raised a delicate porcelain cup in a final toast. To every sidekick whose name may have trembled at the bottom of a cast list, but whose spirit soared at the heart of every scene. Her friends echoed the words, and for a moment the air thrummed with shared resolve. When Vivian Vance passed away 2 weeks later, news anchors around the world spoke of Ethel as television royalty, but fans knew the deeper truth. Her greatest role was as crusader and confidant. At her memorial, networks finally rebroadcast I Love Lucy with new title cards crediting Lucy Ricardo and Ethel Mertz, equal partners in laughter, fulfilling the promise Vivian had fought for. Across social media and streaming services, viewers left comments of gratitude. Parents who shared Ethel's wit with children, performers emboldened to demand fair credit, writers inspired to craft roles that honored every actor. In living rooms lit by the glow of reruns, Vivian's legacy took root in countless hearts. So ends her final confession, not with bitterness, but with gratitude for battles won, friendships tested, and an industry forever changed by her tenacity. Vivian Vance taught us that every performer, no matter how small the role, can stand tall if they dare to claim their worth. May we all, like Ethel, find the courage to step into the spotlight when our time comes.